nail.
Scrooge knew he was dead?
Of course he did.
How could it be otherwise?
Scrooge and he were partners for, well, I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole administrator, his sole executor, his sole assign, his sole friend, and sole mourner.
And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully torn up by the sad event, but was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain.
The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point from which I started. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or else nothing wonderful can come of the story that I am going to relate.
Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name.
There it stood, years afterward, above the warehouse door. Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley.
Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, but sometimes Marley. He answered to both. It was all the same to him.
Oh, but he was a tight-fisted man at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing,
Wrenching,
grasping,
scraping,
clutching,
covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as flint from which no steel struck out generous fire. Secret,
self-contained,
and solitary as an oyster.
The cold within him froze his old features,
Nipped his pointed nose,
shriveled his cheek,
stiffened his gait.
made his eyes red.
His thin lips blew as he shrewdly spoke out in his grating voice. Bah, humbug!
A frosty rime was on his head, and on his eyebrows, and on his wiry chin.
He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He has his office in the dog days and didn't thaw 1 degree at Christmas.
No one stopped him in the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come and see me?" No child asked him what it was o'clock. No beggar implored him to bestow a trifle. No man or woman ever once in their life inquired the ways of such and such a place as Scrooge.
Even the blind men's dogs seemed to know him, and upon seeing him coming on, would drag their owners into open doorways and up courts, and would wag their tails as if to say,
"No eye at all is better than an evil eye, Dark Master."
Did Scrooge care?
it was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along all the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Once upon a time, on all the good days of the year, on Christmas Eve, Scrooge sat busy in his counting house.
It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal. Scrooge could hear the people in the courtyard outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts and stomping their feet upon the pavement stones to warm them.
Now, Scrooge would keep the door to his counting house open so that he might keep an eye upon his clerk, who, in a dismal little cell beyond, a sort of tank, sat busy copying letters. Now, Scrooge had a very small fire.
But the clerk's fire was so very much smaller, it looked like one coal.
But he couldn't replenish it, for so surely as the clerk would come in with the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part.
Wherefore, the clerk put on his brown comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of great imagination, he failed.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!
Bah, humbug.
Christmas? A humbug, Uncle, you don't mean that, I'm sure.
I do. Merry Christmas. What's right of you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
Come then. What right do you have to be this small? What reason do you have to be morose? You're rich enough?
Bah, humbug.
Don't be cross, Uncle.
What else can I be when I live in a world of fools such as this? Merry Christmas, out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without any money? A time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer? A time for balancing your books and having every item in it presented dead against you? If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stick of holly though his heart he should.
Uncle!
Nephew, keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine.
Keep it, but you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone then. Much good may it do you, much good has it ever done you.
There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited. I dare say Christmas among the rest. But I'm sure I've always thought of Christmas time as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely. And therefore, Uncle, though it's never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good. And I say, God bless it.
God bless Fred. your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you don't go into politics.
Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow.
No.
But why?
Why did you get married?
Because I fell in love.
Because you fell in love. Good afternoon.
Nay, Uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as reason for not coming now?
Good afternoon.
I want nothing from you. I ask nothing from you. Why can we not be friends?
Good afternoon.
I am sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been party of. But I have made the trial and homage, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So a Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year.
Good afternoon.
Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. I'd like to play the bad dressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley.
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night.
We have no doubt his generosity is flowed with many slaves surviving partners. At this best institution of your business, Scrooge, it is more than your prison parables of which is made some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in need of common necessity. Hundreds of thousands are what common comfort, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons.
And the union workhouses? Are they still in operation?
They are. Still, I wish I could say they were not.
Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it.
A few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the meat some meat and drink and do the work. We choose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
You wish to be anonymous?
I wish to be left alone. Since you asked me what I wish, ladies, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas time, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many can't go there, and many would rather die.
If they'd rather die, they'd better do it and decrease the surplus population. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with others. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, ladies. You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose.
Well, if quite convenient, sir.
It's not convenient and it's not fair. If I were to stop half a day's pay for it, you think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. And yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
It is only once a year, sir.
A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier the next morning.
Scrooge took his usual melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, he turned his steps towards home. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner, Jacob Marley.
The yard was so dark that even Scrooge knew its every stone was fain to grope with his hands.
Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all remarkable about the knocker, except that it was very, very large.
It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it, night and morning, his whole residence in that place, and that he had of what's little called fancy about him, as any man in the city of London.
Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on old Jacob Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon.
And let any man explain to me, if he can, how it be that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without it undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face.
Marley's face?
It was not an impenetrable shadow, as the rest of the things in the yard were, but had a dismal light about it.
It was not angry or ferocious, but looked as Scrooge as Marley used to, with his ghostly spectacles turned up on his ghostly forehead, and his hair curiously stirred as if by breath or hot air. And though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless.
That and its livid color made it horrible. As Scrooge stared fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. Now to say that he was not surprised would frankly be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key that he had relinquished, walked in, lighted his candle.
Pooh-pooh!
All Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for the darkness.
Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it.
But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through all his rooms to make sure that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to do so. Sitting room,
Bedroom,
lumber room, all as they should be.
nobody under the table,
Nobody under the sofa,
small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and a little saucepan of gruel.
nobody under the bed,
Nobody in the closet.
nobody in his dressing gown, which hung in a suspicious attitude against the wall.
Quite satisfied, he shut his door and locked himself in. Double locked himself in, which was not his custom.
Thus secured against surprise, he sat before the fire to take his gruel.
Humbug.
When he threw his head back in his chair, his glance happened upon a small bell.
A bell?
A disused bell that hung in the room and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with a chamber in the highest story of the building.
It was with great astonishment and an inexplicable dread that as he looked, the bell began to swing.
It swung so softly in an outset that it scarcely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly. And so did every bell in the house.
The bells ceased as they had begun together and gave way to a clanking noise from deep below.
As if some person were dragging heavy chains.
Aren't ghosts in haunted houses described as rattling chains?
The cellar door flew open with a booming sound.
The sound grew louder on the floors below.
Then coming up the stairs.
Then coming straight towards his door.
It's humbug still. I won't believe it.
His color changed though, when, without pause, it passed through the heavy door and into the room before his eyes.
I know him. Marley's ghost.
The same face.
The very same?
Marley in his pigtails, usual waistcoat, tassel on ladder bristling, like his pigtails, and his coat skirt, and the hair upon his head.
The chain he drew was long and wound about, and clasped about the middle. It wound about him like a tail, and it was made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel.
He was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him, could see the two buttons on his waistcoat behind.
How now? What do you want of me?
What?
Who are you?
Ask me who I was
Who are you then?
in life. I was a partner. Jacob Marley. You don't believe in me.
I don't.
What evidence of my reality would you have beyond that of your senses?
I don't know.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. The slightest sort of the stomach, base, and cheeks. You could be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more gravy than a grave about you, whatever you are. You see this coin?
I do.
You're not looking at it.
But I see it, notwithstanding.
Well, I have but to swallow this and be for the rest of my days persecuted by a legion of goblins, all of my own creation. Humbug, I tell you, humbug! Mercy, dreadful aberration, why do you trouble me? I must. But why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they trouble me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad and amongst his fellow men, and travel far and wide. And if that spirit does not fall in life, it is condemned to do so after death. Oh, woe to me, and witness what it cannot share. Might have shared on earth. So the happiness. Oh.
You are chained. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is it heaven strange? Or would you know the weight and length, the strong cord you bear yourself? It was fallen as heavy as the 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have left it on its face. It is a ponderous chain.
Don't be hard upon me. Speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have none to give. It comes from a region
mentions Ebeneezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. Nor can I tell you what I would. Very little more is permitted to me. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our empty house. Mark me! My spirit never roused beyond the narrow limits of our mother's changing home. No rest, no peace. It's such a torture. Oh, remorse! You were always a man of business, Jacob. Business. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, and forbearance and benevolence were all my business. The dealings in the trade were just a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. Oh, hear me, my time is nearly gone. Don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob. Pray. You will be haunted by three spirits. Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? It is. I think I'd rather not. Without their visits, you cannot hope to escape the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow on the boat to his work. Do not take more once and have it over, Jacob. Expect the second on the next night, at the same hour. Expect the third, upon the third night, when the last stroke of code has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake, and remember what has passed to me.
Now, Scrooge tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable. And being from the emotion that he had undergone,
Or the fatigues of the day,
or his glimpse of the invisible world,
or the dull conversation of the ghost,
or the simple lateness of the hour,
much in need of rest,
he went to bed without undressing, and fell asleep upon the instant. So dark that he could scarcely determine the transparent window from the opaque walls of the chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the four quarters. So he listened for the hour.
To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went from 6 to 7, and from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12, then stopped. It was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong, and Icicle must have gotten into the works. 12.
His encounter with old Jacob Marley bothered him exceedingly. After much recurrent inquiry that he decided that it was all just a dream, his mind flew back like a strong spring released to its original position to present the same question to be worked all through.
dream or not?
He lay in this state until the chimes had gone 3/4 more, when he remembered, on a sudden, that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1.
He resolved to wait until the hour had passed, and seeing as how he could no more go to sleep than go to heaven, this was probably the wisest resolution in his power.
At length, it broke upon his listening ear.
1/4. 1/2 past. 1/4 to it. The hour itself and nothing else.
Light flashed up upon the instant, and Scrooge found himself face to face with an unearthly visitor.
It was a strange figure, like a child, viewed through some supernatural medium.
Are you the ghost whose coming was foretold to me?
Yeah,
Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
No, your past.
What business has brought you here?
Your welfare.
I could not help thinking that a night of unbroken rest would have been more conducive to that end.
Your salvation, then. Take heed. Rise and walk with me.
The spirit made towards the window with Scrooge in hand.
I am mortal and liable to fall.
Bear but a touch of my hand, and you shall be a pilgrimess.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and found themselves on an open country road with fields on either hand.
The city had entirely vanished. Not a vestige was to be seen.
The darkness and the mist vanished with them. It was a cold, clear winter day with snow upon the ground.
I was bred in this place. I was a boy here.
Your lip is trembling. And what is that? Upon your cheek.
It's nothing, just a pimple. Lead on, spirit.
You recollect the way.
Remember it. I could walk it blindfold.
Strange to have forgotten it for so many years. Let us go on.
They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a small market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and its winding river.
Some shaggy ponies were seen trotting towards them with boys upon their backs. The boys were in such great spirits that they shouted to one another until the fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it.
These are but the shadows of the things that have been. They can't see us.
The happy travelers passed by, and Scrooge named them every one.
Why was he so rejoiced to see them?
Why did his cold eye glisten? Why did his heart leap up? Why was he filled with gladness as he saw them giving each other a Merry Christmas as they passed at crossroads and byways to their several homes? Out upon Merry Christmas? What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? What good had it ever done him?
The school, it's not quite deserted. A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is not there still.
I know it.
They went, the ghost and Scrooge, across the hall to a door in the back of the schoolhouse.
The door disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made bare by the lines of plain desks.
On one of these, a lonely boy sat reading by a feeble fire. Scrooge sat down beside him and wept to see his poor, forgotten self as he used to be.
Poor boy. I wish... But it's too late now.
What is the matter?
Nothing, nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all.
Let us see another Christmas.
Scrooge's former self grew large at the words. The room around him grew darker and a little dirtier.
He was alone again when all of the other boys had gone home for the holidays. He was not reading now, rather walking back and forth despairingly.
Dear brother, I have come to bring you home, dear brother, to bring you home, home, home!
Home, old man.
Yes, home for good and all, home forever and ever. Father was so much kinder than he used to be. That's home like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed. I was not afraid to ask him once more if he might come home. And he said, yes, you should. And sent me a coach to bring you. And you're to be a man who never returned here. But first, we're to be together all Christmas long and have the merriest time in all the world.
You're quite a woman, old man.
Always a delicate creature, who breath might have withered.
But she had a large heart.
So she did, Spirit. I will not communicate. God forbid.
She died a woman and had, as I think, children. One child. True. Your nephew. Yes.
Although they had but that moment left the schoolhouse behind them, they now stood in the busy thoroughfares of a city, where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, where shadowy carts and coaches battled for the way, and all the strife and tumult of a real city were.
It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that here too was Christmas time again, though it was evening and the streets were lit up.
Do you know this place? No, I was apprenticed here.
At the sight of an old gentleman, Scrooge cried out with great excitement.
Why, it's old Fezziwig. Bless my heart, it's Fezziwig alive again.
Yo ho there, Ebeneezer. Don.
Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice.
Dawn Wilkins, to be sure. Bless me, she was very much attached to me, was Dawn. Poor Dawn. Dear, dear.
Yo ho, my friends. No word tonight. Christmas, Don. Christmas Eve, Ebeneezer. Let's have the shutters up before man can say Jack Robinson.
They charged into the streets with the shutters,
1, 2, 3,
had them up in their places,
4, 5, 6,
barred them and pinned them,
7, 8, 9.
and were back before you could have got to 12, panting like racehorses.
Hilly ho, my friends. Let's make lots of room here. Hilly ho, Don. Cheer up, Ebeneezer.
Clear away? There was nothing those two wouldn't have cleared away, or couldn't have with old Fezziwig looking on.
It was done in a minute. The warehouse was as warm and dry and snug and bright a ballroom as you would wish to see upon a winter's night.
In came a fiddler with a music book. He went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it.
In came Mrs. Fezziwig with one vast, substantial smile.
Then in came the three Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable.
In came the 6 young followers whose hearts they broke.
Then in came all the young men and women employed in the business.
In they all came, one after another. Away they all went, 20 couples at once, hands halfway round and back again, down the middle and up the other side, round and round in various stages of affectionate grouping.
Places, everyone, places!
This domestic ball broke up.
Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations on either side of the door, saying goodnight and a Merry Christmas to everyone as they left.
Now during the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the event, and with his former self. He corroborated everything, remembered everything, and enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation.
It was not until now that he was conscious of the ghost looking full upon him.
Such a small matter to make these silly folks so full of gratitude. Small? Why is it not? You spend but a few pounds of your mortal money. 3 or 4 perhaps. Why is it so much that he deserves this praise? It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil, to say that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it costs a fortune. What is the matter? Nothing in particular. Something, I think. No, I'd just like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now, that's all. My time grows short. Quick.
Again, Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life.
He had yet to have the harsh lines of later years.
But he was not alone, and sat by the side of a young girl, in whose eyes there were tears.
What's wrong, Bells?
It matters little to you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve.
What idol has displaced you?
A golden one.
This is the even-handed dealing of the world. There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, but there is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth.
You fear the world too much. I've seen your noble aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion, gain, engrosses you. Have I not?
What then? Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed towards you.
Our engagement is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so, until, in good season, we could improve our worldly fortune through our patient industry. You were changed when it was made. You were another man.
I was a boy.
Your old feeling tells me you are not what you are. I am. This was a promised happiness when we are one in heart is now fraught with misery that we are two. How often, how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you.
Have I ever sought release?
In words, no, never.
In what then?
In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, another atmosphere of life, another hope of its great end, of anything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had not been between us, tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now? No.
Think not?
I would gladly think otherwise if I could, but if you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, did I even think that you would choose a dowerless girl? I release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were. May you be happy in the life you've chosen.
Spirit, leave me. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me? I told you that these are the shadows of the things I've been. They are what they are. Do not blame me. Leave me. Take me home. Haunt me no longer!
tough snort. Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was yet again upon the stroke of one.
Yet when the bell tolled one and no figure appeared, he was awoken with a fit of trembling.
"5 minutes.
10 minutes.
A quarter of an hour passed, yet nothing came.
All this time, he wondered at a blaze of ruddy light that shone upon the clock.
He had decided, yet again after much mature inquiry, that the source and secret of this ghostly light was in the adjoining room, from whence, on further tracing it, it seemed to shine.
This idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up and shuffled to the door.
He had just put his hand upon the lock when a strange voice called him by name and bade him enter.
Ebeneezer Scrooge!
He obeyed. It was his own room. There's no doubt about that.
It had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceilings were so full of living greenery, from which red berries glistened.
The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light as if so many tiny little mirrors had been scattered there, and a mighty blaze roared up the chimney.
Heaped up on the floor to form a kind of throne was every kind of food imaginable.
Come and know me better, man! I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. You have never seen the likes of me before.
Never.
Have you never walked forth with younger members of my family?
I don't think I have. I'm afraid I have not. Have you had many brothers, Spirit?
More than 1,800.
A tremendous family to provide for. Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and learnt a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you ought to teach me, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe.
Scrooge did as he was told and held it fast.
Holly, ivy, mistletoe, red berries, turkey, geese, game, brawn, poultry, sausages, oysters, pies, puddings, and punch all vanished instantly.
So did the room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of night, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning, where the people were making a rough but brisk and not unpleasant kind of music, and scraping the snow from the pavement in front of their dwellings.
The people who were shoveling away at their housetops were so jovial and full of glee, and every now and then exchanged a playful snowball.
The sight of these poor revelers seemed to interest the Spirit very much, for he stood beside 3 quarreling children with Scrooge at his side and sprinkled incense on them from his torch.
It was a very uncommon kind of torch, for whenever a few drops of water were shed upon them, their good humor was restored directly.
For they said it was a shame to quarrel upon Christmas Day.
And so it was.
God love it, so it was.
Is there a peculiar flavor for which you sprinkle from your torch?
There is my own.
Would it apply to any person on this day?
To any kindly given, to a poor one most.
Why to a poor one most?
As a poor one needs it most.
And perhaps it was his own pleasure in showing off this power of his, or his own hearty and good nature, and sympathy with all poor men that led him to the dwelling of Scrooge's clerk. For there he went, with Scrooge in hand.
The Spirit stopped and smiled on the threshold of the door and sprinkled incense from his torch to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling.
Up rose Mrs. Cratchit, dressed but poorly in a twice-turned gown, but brave in ribbons.
Which are cheap.
And make a goodly show for 6 pence.
She laid the cloth, assisted by Melinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, also brave in ribbons.
While Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes.
In came the young Cratchit girl, who proclaimed that outside the baker she had smelled the goose and known it for her own, and basking in luxurious thoughts of sage and onion, this young Cratchit girl began to dance around the table.
Why, what has ever got your precious father then? And your brother, Tiny Tim. And Martha were in his late last Christmas Day by half an hour. Here's Martha, Mother.
Here's Mother, hooray!
Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are.
Do you want to went to finish up last night and had to carry away this morning?
Well, never mind, so long as you're come. Sit ye down before the fire, my dear, and have a warm. Lord bless ye.
No, there's Mother coming. Hi, Martha, hi.
Why, where Not coming upon Christmas Day.
Here I
Martha!
am. Dad. Where's the family?
How did little Tim behave?
As good as gold, and better. Somehow, he gets off with thoughtful sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hopes people saw him in the church, because he's a cripple, and it might do them well to remember upon Christmas Day, who makes lame beggars walk and blind men see.
With that, Mrs. Cratchit began to make the gravy hissing hot.
Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor.
Miss Belinda sweetened up the applesauce.
Martha dusted the hot plates.
And at last, Bob took Tiny Tim beside him at a tiny corner of the table.
The two young Cratchits set chairs for everybody, not forgetting themselves.
At last the dishes were set on and grace was said.
There never was such a goose.
Its tenderness and flavor, size, and cheapness were the objects of universal admiration. Eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes, it was a sufficient meal for the entire family.
The two young Cratchits in particular were steeped up in sage and onion to their eyebrows.
At last the dinner was done.
The cloth was cleared,
The hearth swept,
and the fire made up.
and the whole family gathered around. Then Bob proposed.
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us.
God bless us. God bless us, every one of us.
He sat very close to his father's side, and Bob took his little hand in his because he loved the child and wished that he would never be taken from him.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the pork chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. The shadows remain unaltered by the future. The child will die.
Oh no, Spirit, say he will be spared.
The shadows remain unaltered by the future. None other than my own race shall find him here. What then? If he be likely to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population.
Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the Spirit, and he was filled with penitence and grief.
It may be that in the sight of heaven, you are worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child.
Mr. Scrooge. I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it.
My dear, the children, Christmas Day.
It should be Christmas Day, I am sure, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows better than you do. Poor fellow.
My dear, Christmas Day.
I'll drink his health for your sake and the day's, not for his. Long life to him, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt.
The children drank the toast after her.
It was the first of their proceedings which had no joy.
The mention of Scrooge's name cast a dark shadow on the family, which was not dispelled for a full 5 minutes.
But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And at parting, they seemed so even in the bright sprinklings of the Spirit's torch. And Scrooge had his eye upon them, and on Tiny Tim especially, to the last.
Scrooge was surprised to hear a hearty laugh.
He was even more surprised to find that the laugh belonged to his nephew, Fred, and that he was now in the middle of a bright, dry, and gleaming room. And he looked to see the Spirit beside him, smiling, and looking at the same nephew with great affability.
If you should, by any unlikely chance, meet a man more blessed in laugh than Scrooge's nephew, all I can say is, I should like to know him too. Introduce him to me, and I shall cultivate his acquaintance.
He said that Christmas was a humbug, as I really believed it too. He's a comical fellow, that's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. His offenses carry their own punishments, and I have nothing to say against him.
I'm sure he's very rich, Fred. At least that's why you always tell me so.
What of that, my dear? His wealth is of no use to him. He don't do any good with it. He don't make himself comfortable with it. He hasn't the satisfaction of thinking he's ever going to benefit any of us with it.
I haven't tasted the good thing.
Oh, I do. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself. Always. Here he takes it into his head to dislike us and not make merry with us. What's the consequence? You don't lose much of a dinner.
He's food for the very good dinner.
I was only going to say that the consequence of him not making merry with us and coming to dine with us is that I think that he loses some pleasanter moments. I'm sure he loses pleasanter companions, either in his dusty old chambers or moldy offices. I mean to give him the same chance year after year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. If he should find me going there, in good temper, year after year, saying, "Uncle Scrooge, how are you?" if it only puts him in the mood to leave his poor clerk $50, then I think that's something. I think I shook it yesterday. He's given us plenty of merriment, and it would be ungrateful not to drink to his health. So I say, Uncle Scrooge.
Uncle Scrooge.
A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is. He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it. Uncle Scrooge.
Now Scrooge had become so light of heart that he would have wished the unknowing company in return, and thanked them in inaudible speech, had the Spirit just given him time.
The whole scene was passed off in the breath of the last words of his nephew, and the Spirit and Scrooge were again upon their travels.
Much they saw and far they went, and many homes they visited, each with a happy ending.
They visited sick beds, and they were cheerful. On foreign lands, and they were close at home. By struggling men, and they were patient in their greater hopes. By poverty, and it was rich.
In poorhouse, hospital, and jail, in misery's every refuge, where poor man and his last bit of authority had not barred him away, the Spirit entered, left his blessings, and taught Scrooge his lessons.
Though Scrooge did not change in his outward form, the ghost grew older, clearly older.
Are spirits' lives so short?
My time upon this globe is brief. It ends tonight.
Tonight?
Tonight, at midnight, are the hours drawing near.
The clock struck 12.
Scrooge looked for the ghost and saw it not.
As he looked around wonderingly, he remembered the warning of old Jacob Marley, and before his very eyes, a phantom, draped and hooded, came towards him like a mist, crawling along the ground. phantom slowly,
Gravely.
silently approached.
As it grew near, Scrooge bent upon his knee, for through the very air which the phantom moved spread gloom and mystery.
I am in the presence of ghosts of Christmas yet to come. You are about to show me the shadows of the things that have not yet happened, but will happen in the time before us. Is that so, Spirit? Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any specter I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be a better man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company, and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me? Lead on, lead on. The night is waning fast and it's precious time to me. I know, lead on.
The spirit moved away as it had come towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along.
They scarcely seemed to enter the city, rather the city seemed to spring up about them and encompass them of its own act. And there they were, in the heart of it.
The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen, and observing that its bony hand was pointed towards them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk.
No, I don't know much about it. All I know is that he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
Why? What was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die.
God knows.
What has he done with his money?
Left it to his company, perhaps. All I know is hasn't left a single bit of it to me.
It's supposed to be a very cute funeral, but come on, I don't know if anybody would go to it. Suppose we make up a party and go over here.
I'd go if lunch is provided, but I must be fed, if I go. I'm the most disinterested among you. After all, I never wear black gloves, and I never really eat lunch. But I'll offer to go if anybody else will. For now that I come to think of it, I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and talk business whenever we met. Goodbye.
Speakers and listeners strolled away and mixed with other groups.
Scrooge looked to the spirit. The spirit glided on into the streets and pointed a two-persons meeting. Scrooge stopped and listened, in hopes that the explanation might lie here.
He knew these men also perfectly. They were men of business. They were wealthy and of great importance. He made it a point to always stay high in their esteem. In a business point of view, of course. Strictly in a business point of view.
Well, how are you? How are you? Well, Scratch has got his own at last, eh? Well, it's seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose. Who are you?
Not another word.
That was their meeting?
Their conversation.
And their pardon.
Spirit, I see, I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this?
He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed. He now stood next to a bed. A poor, untamed, bereft bed, on which something lay underneath a ragged sheet, which, though it was dumb, announced itself in an awful language.
The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Scrooge glanced around it in obedience to a secret impulse, anxious to know what kind of room it was. And there, laying in the outer air, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man.
Observing that the spirit's hand was pointed towards the head, Scrooge leaned in to inspect it. It was so carelessly adjusted and covered up that the slightest motion of a finger on Scrooge's part would have uncovered it.
He thought of it, felt how easy it would be to do, and longed to do it, though he had no more power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the specter at his side.
Spirit, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me. Let us go. I understand you, and I would do it. But I have not the power, Spirit. I have not the power. If there is any person in this town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, show that person to me, Spirit, I beseech you.
The spirit held his cloak up like a wing, and dropping it, revealed a room by daylight where a nervous wife was sitting.
Is it good or bad?
Bad.
Are we pray for it?
No, there's hope yet, Caroline.
If you relent, spirits, nothing is past hope yet, if such a miracle has happened.
He's past relenting. He's dead.
To whom will our debt be transferred?
We don't know, but before that time, we shall be heard from him. And even though we were not, it would be bad fortune to find a creditor and his successor. May he sleep tonight with light that's care.
Their hearts were indeed lighter, and it was a happier house than death.
The only emotion the ghost could show him caused by this event was one of pleasure.
Let me see some
Tenderness connected with the death, or that dark chamber, which we left just now, will be ever present to me.
The spirit led him on through streets familiar to his feet. Scrooge looked and looked to find himself, but he was nowhere to be seen.
They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, to find a poor wife and children seated around the fire.
Quiet.
Very quiet. The color hurts my eyes. They're better now again. It makes them weep by candlelight, and I wouldn't show you guys to your father when he comes home. The world. It must be near his time. I have known him to walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder, very fast indeed. But he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so that it was no trouble. No trouble. And there's your father at the door. Sunday. You want to stay then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But don't worry. I promised him that I would walk there with you often. My little child. My little child.
Spirit, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me who the man was we saw lying dead.
Without saying another word, the spirit went on, as if to the end.
A churchyard. Here, then, the wretched man whose name he had now to learn lay underneath the ground.
It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, the growth of vegetation's death, not life.
A worthy place.
The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one.
Before I draw closer to the stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or the shadows of the things that may be only?
Scrooge fell to his knees, and following the finger, read his own name.
Ebeneezer Scrooge.
I, the man who lay upon the bed? Oh no, Spirit. Spirit, hear me. I am not the man I was. I am not the man I must have been for this experience. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Good Spirit, your nature intercedes me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change the shadows of the things you have shown me by an altered life. I will honor Christmas in all my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons they teach. Oh, tell me I may smudge away the writings on the stone.
Christmas, come this way.
own.
And the room was his own.
Best and joyous of all, the time was his own, to make amends in.
I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. O Jacob Marley, heaven in the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my feet, O Jacob Marley on my feet. The shadows of the things that might have been may be dispelled. They will be, I know they will. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. Hello, whoop, hello. There's the saucepan that the gruel was in. There's the door to which old Jacob Marley enters. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas presents at. It's all here. It's all true. It all happened. Ah ha ha.
For a man who is so out of practice, it was a splendid laugh.
A most illustrious laugh.
The father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs.
I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind, I'd rather be a baby.
He ran to the window and stuck his head out.
No fog.
No mist.
Clear.
Bright.
Jovial.
Golden sunlight.
Heavenly skies.
Sweet, fresh air.
Merry bells.
Oh, glorious, glorious. What's today?
Huh?
What's today, my fine lady?
Today? Why, Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day. I hadn't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello.
Hello.
Do you know the butcher's on the next street at the corner?
Yes, I do.
A remarkable girl. Do you know whether they sold the prize turkey that was hanging out there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one.
The one as big as me?
An intelligent girl, a delightful girl. It's a pleasure to talk to her. Yes, my dear.
It's hanging there now.
Is it? Go and buy it.
What?
No, I'm in earnest. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here, and I shall give them the address where to take it. Come back with the man and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you half a crown. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit. He shan't know who sent it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim.
The hand with which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did, somehow, and went downstairs to wait for the baker's man.
Here's the turkey. Hello, Merry Christmas.
It was a turkey. He couldn't have stood on his own 2 legs, that bird.
It would have snapped them straight off in a minute like sticks of sealing wax.
Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. You must have a cab.
The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey,
And the chuckle with which he paid for the cab.
and the chuckle with which he recompensed the child, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down, breathless in his chair, and chuckled till he cried.
He dressed himself all in his best and was finally out into the streets.
At this time, the people were now pouring out, just as he had seen with the ghost of Christmas present. He walked, and walking with his hands behind his back, he greeted them all with a delighted smile.
He was so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 2 or 3 good-humored fellows stopped and said,
Good morning, sir. Merry Christmas.
It was about at this time that, as he was walking along, he noticed in his path the 2 young ladies who had come into his office the day before and inquired, "Scrooge of Marley's, I believe." It sent a pain across his heart to think about how these young ladies would think of him. But, seeing as how his path lay straight before him, he took it.
Good morning. I hope you were successful yesterday. It was very kind of you. Merry Christmas.
Mr. Scrooge?
Yes, that is my name, and I'm afraid it may not be very pleasant to you. But allow me to ask your pardon. Will you have the goodness to accept?
My dear Mr. Scrooge, you can't be serious.
No, a great many back payments are included. Will you do me the favor?
My dear sir, I don't know what to say.
Don't say anything, please. Come and see me. Will you come and see me?
I will.
Thank you. I'm much obliged to you. Thank you 50 times. Bless you.
He went to church
and walked about the streets,
and greeted children
and patted children on their head,
and questioned beggars,
and looked into the kitchens of houses,
and up into the windows.
and found that anything could bring him joy.
You know, he had never thought that anything could bring him such pleasure.
In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house.
Is your master at home, my dear?
Yes, sir.
Where is he, my love?
He's upstairs along with the mistress. He'll take you up if you please.
He knows me. I'll go in here, thank you.
Let him in. It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off.
He was home in 5 minutes.
Nothing could be heartier.
Wonderful party.
Wonderful games.
Wonderful happiness.
But he was early to the office the next morning. Oh, he was early there.
If only he could be the first and catch Bob Cratchit coming in late. That was the very thing he had set his heart upon.
And he did it. Oh, yes, he did. 10 minutes.
No Bob.
A quarter of an hour passed.
No Bob.
He was a full 18 minutes behind his time. And Scrooge, again, keeping the door open so he could keep an eye out for his clerk so he may see him coming in.
His hat and scarf were off before he reached the door. He was on a stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he was trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I am very sorry, sir. I am behind my time.
Yes, you are. I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please.
It is only once a year, sir. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
You're right. It shall not be repeated. And therefore I'm going to raise your salary. I'm going to raise your salary and assist your struggling family. We'll discuss your affairs this afternoon over a smoking bowl of Bishop Bob. Now, make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit.
Scrooge was much better than his word.
He did it all and infinitely more.
And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father.
He was as good a man,
As good as master.
as good a friend, as anyone in the good old world knew. As anyone in the good old city, town, or borough in the good old world knew.
And it was said that people would laugh to see this change in him. But he would let them laugh. For he was wise enough to know that nothing happened in this world for good, that some people did not have their share of laughter. And knowing that they were blind, he felt it was just as well that they wrinkle their eyes in grins as have the melody in less attractive forms.
And his own heart laughed to hear it.
Now it's also said that Scrooge knew more than any man just how to keep the Christmas spirit in his heart. If any man alive possessed the knowledge. Now let that be said of us.
And all of us.
And so, as Tiny Tim observed,